Hey everybody, Quantum here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at Game 2 of my match with my friend who's on Amber Emerald discard. And after some more testing, because this is a bit of an older match now at this point, I think it is a pretty good counter pick to the Sapphire decks, mainly Sapphire Steel if you're seeing that a lot. Because Amber Emerald can really just take apart the Sapphire Steel game plan before they get up and running, and if that's the case, it can be very hard for them to recover. In the LCCC, you saw Kurt Spice, I believe, 2-0 a Sapphire Steel deck. A little bit more of an unconventional one, but you can definitely see how Discard can use some of its tools in order to shut down critical pieces of the Sapphire engines, right? When they're down to their final few cards and they rely on some of their draw engine to replenish their resources, they're just not able to do so. What I will say is, like I said, this is an older matchup. I think my mulligan decision here was absolutely incorrect. I should have more aggressively mulliganed away some cards, like the Scrooge and the Maurice's Workshop, but I opted to keep them because going into this match, if I know I'm going up against discard, I want to keep one of my draw engines, and I had Hiram and I had Maurice's Workshop. So here you can see they played Diablo. They see my hand, and with the Emerald Amber discard deck, there's a very good chance that they have Ursula and or Bare Necessities. So they're going to be looking to snipe out those songs and or items at this point now as well, in order to shut down the ability for you to take out their Diablo, because that is really the card that does a lot of work for them in these matchups. Because you don't want to be drawing with Hirams and Workshops if they have an exerted Diablo. I mean, you kind of have to sometimes and just force your way through, like what I did in game 1, I believe, if you watch that matchup, which is again a little while ago now on my channel. But here I opt to go with the Fortisphere, draw a card, and play the Bella for free. So again, a seemingly pretty strong play, because if my opponent goes Shift Diablo, I have a Singer if I get a Song. So yeah, you can see here they really want to see if I drew a song, which is, I guess I drew two, right? Because I drew one for turn, I drew one on Fortisphere. So there is a good chance that I pulled a song. Now, in this variation, if you saw at the beginning, I was testing out Grab Your Swords, which arguably is worse into this matchup, or better, depending on the scenario. But the Let the Storm Rage On is what I replaced it with. And again, I was just testing stuff out just because I wanted a more impactful song in order to deal with the more aggressive decks. And just so happens that this deck, having Prince John's, Grab Your Swords is good into that as well. But the Storm Rage is definitely the more optimal card, I think, and for most matchups still, just because of the redraw effect. It costs cheaper, so the Bell can sing it, obviously, and I think that's pretty much solidified now. But it didn't matter, because once I mulliganed away the first Grab Your Swords, even if it was a Storm, I think I drew into the Bell off the mulligan, so I probably would have mulliganed away more Uninkables in order to make sure I had a good curve. But yeah, the Bell interaction is just so important here. And if you do want to beat discard, you just have to try to aggressively push for your removal of those Diablos. The Prince Johns are going to come down, and you may not have any interaction with them, and that's okay. You'll just have to do your best in order to, I guess you could say, erase them, because they don't have real, like, their only real way to out your board is Kita Under the Sea. And they're, once they get that off a few times, as long as you've been able to deal with the rest of their board, and even if they have just a couple of warded characters up like Muses and Prince John, you'll hopefully be able to survive the onslaught long enough. Again, depending on how their deck is built, they play like You're Welcome and things like that, forcing you to draw, but they play that as an out to Lucky Dime. That's all they really have. But you can see, like, this deck, the Amber Emerald deck, can counter the Sapphire Steel deck fairly well. So you just have to be really careful if you do face up against this as a Sapphire Steel player as to what you're going for and how you're going to play things. So here, because I ramp with Tipo, I'm going to be able to get the 4 ink, and I have no item to play with the Hiram, so I'm going to go for the Workshop, and I have 1 leftover ink. But again, the opponent being on the Diablo here is going to draw anytime I try to draw off of that Hiram or off of that Workshop. The good news is that, I could just let them draw, and then I just need to find my 1 song, deal with the Diablo, and hopefully I draw into more songs to deal with subsequent Diablos that come down after. The constant issue is, though, they're going to draw a bunch of cards, which means, yeah, they're going to draw into more Diablos, they're going to draw into more Bare Necessities, more Ursula Deceivers, and they're just going to be able to consistently, take out the threats that end up dealing with their big threats. So they quest with Diablo, and, they're exerting everything to sing. Under the Sea, but they only have 2 cards left in their hand now. They're going to draw off Diablo, and they're probably feeling fairly comfortable here because, again, as long as they don't draw into a song, they should be okay. I draw into another Hiram, and this, you know, this is a tough position. You could argue that I should have played Fishbone and drawn 1 instead of playing the Hiram and banishing the Workshop, but I'm really just trying to dig for that song because, yeah, it's, any song here is what I need. In this particular scenario, like I said, the Grab Your Swords would have actually been pretty good into this board because it clears off 2 instead of just the Storm Rage. But they went from 2 cards in hand now to 4. They draw more cards, which means their Prince John is going to cause me to discard even more. And yeah, there it goes. I have no action, right? Play a lot of songs, or a decent amount of songs and actions, but I have none in my hand, so I'm forced to discard 2, which means they're going to draw 2, and then they're going to continue to draw off Diablo. And this is, how this deck just snowballs to victory because they draw answers, or not answers, but they draw mitigation measures that prevent you from dealing with their Diablo. Their Diablo is drawing, and then off their Diablo draws, they're drawing discard for their Prince John engine, and they just synergize off each other. And they just out-resource you, and all they need is like 1 or 2 Under the Sea combos with the Kita in order to completely wipe out your board. So yeah, I think I said the opponent obviously didn't Under the Sea Kita me, but they painted the roses Under the Sea me, which in this scenario is just as good, right? They just don't get the body of the Kita on board. But yeah, here playing Fishbone just so I can quest, banish, draw 2. Again, you can argue that I'm playing this the wrong way, and I probably am, but I'm just looking for the song. I was really I'm not tilted, but I was like, man, I just want to see a song. Why can't I see a song? So here I end up just giving up and digging into my deck, looking for where that first song was, right? We play Zeus's, we play Strengths, and we play either Grab Your Swords or Let the Storm Rage on. In this variation, I was on the Grab Your Swords. But yeah, a ton of cards deep. I just have no answer to the Diablo in my first 20, 25 cards, despite giving them draws, trying to dig for the answer myself. And that's just a way that Sapphire Steel can really fall apart against discard. Yeah, you can have the answers, but if you don't see the answer soon enough, they're just going to rip apart your hand and put you in top deck mode, clear your board, and then you're on nothing, and they're on everything. So let's go ahead and take a look at a variation of Amber Steel that you could be running if you want to counter the Sapphire decks. So here is an example of how you may want to build Amber Emerald discard. I am keeping this list, well, it's not hidden anymore, but I haven't made it completely public because I haven't extensively tested this myself, but I have played Amber Emerald discard quite a bit in the past, and like I said, it's pretty much the same. You just have to adapt to the meta a little bit. You added in the new Tramp, Street Smart Dog, which is a phenomenal card for this deck and for this ink pairing. And then for the most part, your game plan is the same. Again, you just have to know how to play into the meta decks, and you should be good to go. And with Sapphire being one of the most popular colors, the deck not plays itself, but the lines of play are a little bit easier to facilitate. You have item removal in Clarabelle. This card can be bounced repeatedly with your Muses, so you can constantly remove items if you need to. Diablo, seeing the opening hand, knowing if you need to follow through with a Deceiver and or Bare Necessities to rip the song, and protecting the shift line for the Diablo if you have that. Ariel to dig for songs, of which you play 19 songs, so likely will always hit. For Prince John, another draw engine, as well as just such a menace of a character to deal with. This is another card, man. Ever since this card came out, this card is a problem, but that's a card to be discussed at another time. You thought Bucky was a problem, but honestly, Prince John, I would say is also just problematic as a card to play against. Very unfun. 4 of the Muses, I like 4. It's one of your key engines for the discard deck. You definitely want to see this because it's one of your main mitigation measures. It helps bounce your own cards. You can do things like painting the roses your own Kita to bounce it back to hand. And what's even more powerful is the Tramp. The Tramp being a 2/6, I think they knew what they were doing with this. They made it so that Muses can bounce the Tramp back, meaning that you can repeatedly play this for free. or pay very little to play it out every turn if you want. Like you can quest with it, then sing a song, bounce it back, replay it for like 1 or 2 or for free, like I said, and then draw a ton of cards, find more songs to fuel the muses, find more answers to your opponent's board, and it's just like really, really strong overall. Only 11 uninkables in this variation as well, which is pretty strong. I opted not for a Lucifer, but you probably want to cut one You Have Forgotten Me for a Lucifer. Taking the stance of, I guess you can call it the Ed Chu stance, where you just want to play 4Ls of everything that's good. I want to see my Prince Johns, and if I see my Prince Johns, I want to see my You Have Forgotten Me's, and I want to maximize the odds that I see this on curve, and that's why I opted to make it this way. The Lucifer is good, obviously, because it can be bounced back with the Muses. It's a character, can quest for 2. It is a 5-cost uninkable, so it's 2 removed from the John, and it's another uninkable that you're adding to the deck, and it can be a very dead card, but then again, so can You Have Forgotten Me. The difference being Forgotten Me can be inked, Lucifer cannot in this deck. All of your songs are inkable, well, except for Under the Sea, but they all have their purpose here. The Painting the Roses Red is a redraw engine, can be good ink, and helps facilitate, as you saw in that match, a way to reduce some mid-range characters down enough so that you can be so that they can be Under the Seed, even if you don't have the Kita. 4 Bare Necessities, because it serves the same purpose as Ursula, protect your main plays. 4 Sudden Chills as just another strong discard engine card. 2 You're Welcomes, deal with the threats that you can't out any other way, particularly the items and or locations. McDuck Manor's coming in can be a bit of a problem as well. And then 3 Brunos. You could argue to play 4, but because this only hits characters, it can be a little bit of a liability, but it's still a very good card. It's your only form of like hard removal for certain cards. So it's definitely a card that you could consider playing 4 of as well. As far as the overall strength level of the deck, this deck has always been known for not being able to deal with like big threats on board, and like Bruno helps you do that. Like if there's a high willpower character, especially with resist, like you're not going to really be able to throw your cards into it and take it out, right? You're going to have to try to deal with it another way, and like Bruno and Under the Sea are your essentially only forms of removal into that. That being said, I don't think you necessarily want to, but you could play a Crikey as well, or Cricky, just because it's a way to boost up your characters to throw them into opposing characters. But then you're running the risk of, well, now I have this card that doesn't fit my main game plan. I'm playing it kind of as a countermeasure to other decks, and in a lot of matches, it's just going to be a not so good card or a card that you can't really utilize in the moment. And so those kind of conditional cards in a deck like this don't serve all that much purpose. Stick to your game plan, like I said. The Ed Chu way, built for consistency. That's what this card needs, and Tramp really helps to do that. Like this card single-handedly changes like how good this deck is. It vastly improves the consistency. You could play 3, but I'm on 4. Another thing to consider is like this thing is a 7-cost card that gets reduced, right? So even if you only pay 2 or 3 for it, it still hits the board and is a 7-cost card. And why does that matter? Because it can sing the You're Welcome, the Bruno, and the Under the Sea. Like it can sing all of your like high-cost songs. So not only have to rely on like Kita, which has to come out at turn 5 basically in a deck like this because you don't play the shift line in order to sing Bruno. Otherwise you're hard casting it. Like putting this down early, being able to use it as a singer for your high-cost cards. If it was 8, it would arguably be even better, which is crazy to say, right? Because yeah, you might have to pay 1 more and you're likely not having 8 characters on the board at once. But being able to single-handedly sing Under the Sea is pretty nice. That being said, though, I mean, it doesn't really matter because, again, you're not playing this unless you have other characters on board anyways, and this plus any other character is an Under the Sea sing, right? So it's a super powerful card. I think it is very underrated. Like, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you guys. I've mentioned this before in the past. A card that says draw cards, need I say more, right? Look at Clarabelle, look at Hiram. Like all these cards have exploded in price because they are draw spells, draw creatures, draw cards. The Tramp for this ink pairing is an incredible card. I know my friend who I'm playing against bought extra copies. I bought some extra copies because I also believe that it is an extremely underrated card right now. And this ink pairing is still very good. This ink pairing is great with aggro. This ink pairing is great with this card. So yeah, like this card, the only card from the new set that this deck plays, really does change a lot for the viability of this deck. And then the final card, I'm opting for 2 Hidden Coves. The Cove is just a monster. The Cove is just so good. Yeah, only 2. You could maybe argue to play 3, go up to 61 maybe. I wouldn't really cut anything else Like, you still want to have 4 like on curve discard. Like, if you cut a Forgotten Me, you want to play a Lucifer, I would say. But like the Cove protecting the John a little bit more. Not that Grab Your Swords is really played, but it's kind of useful. Obviously, the main thing is that it protects Diablo. Being able to protect Ariel from Brawl and things like that is also nice. And then, yeah, Tramp from Brawl and things like that is also pretty good. And then the big thing into like red, blue, and stuff is like it protects all of these 2 creatures, 2 strength monsters from the Sisu wipe. And so that's kind of the big thing there. But if you don't see it, it's not the end of the world. You know, if your Diablo gets dealt with, hopefully you have other forms of discard. Like, from an old school Yu-Gi-Oh player mindset, when you look at a deck like this, and it's also what Ed's deck did in the national championship, and what Dinka Fam's deck did when he won DLC Melbourne. You look at these decks and you look at the avenues of attack that they have. You saw in that matchup, right? The opponent puts the Diablo on board. I have to find the answer to the Diablo. I have to spend resources, spend my answers on the Diablo. In the meantime, my opponent's building up other threats. Now they put a Prince John on board. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do to deal with this thing? I have to basically force it to go sideways and try to take it out that way because of the ward. So it's a problem having a hand. You know, I need to play with a hand. I can't play my deck in top deck mode. So it's always going to have discard fodder, which means the John is going to trigger, which means they're going to draw more cards. And they're just going to out-resource you if they get the setup going, right? So what are your solid answers to those things? In the meantime, as you're building up a board, you have to always keep in the back of your mind. And again, this is what my opponent hit me with, right? The Diablo, the Prince John, and then the Under the Sea. It's like I try to build up a board, use up my hand so I have less to discard, but then I'm at risk of overextending into an Under the Sea, right? Into a Kita Under the Sea, into a Painting the Roses Under the Sea, etc. Like, it can be a bit of a problem here. And that's why the deck is pretty good and pretty powerful. Again, discard decks, I think if they see the curve, they're basically unbeatable, honestly. But they are still very fragile. If they don't see the proper combo pieces at the right time, sometimes the decks just fall apart. But again, that's where Tramp helps solve some of that consistency issue with the deck. So that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And yeah, stay tuned for more. We'll probably do a meta report after this video and then cover some more top deck lists, I think, for the format.